He's a local. He's lived in Camden for well over 20 years, about 23 now?
Almost 23.
Almost 23. So we're delighted that Andrew has all these credentials, and we're going for the big one. Or Andrew's going for the big one. If Andrew wins, I'll try and say this, if Andrew wins, Inshallah. Keir Starmer loses.
We have a situation where our politicians feel so distant from the people they're supposed to represent and serve. And part of the purpose of this campaign is really to change that. So as an MP, I would ensure that every week I was here in person to hear people's concerns. This office space, retail space, while Holborn and St Pancras is crying out for more social and council housing, for more affordable housing across the borough, for rent controls, and for a totally different approach to housing and to local services that puts the people of Holborn and St Pancras and Camden first. Not the desire of the council to maximize its income from commercial properties. And this is a major problem that we have in Holborn and St Pancras, is that if they had their way, the people who run this borough in Keir Starmer's name would like to push the poorer members of our community out of the borough so that they can turn more and more social and council housing into space like this. And this is emblematic of everything that is wrong with our politics. We put our billionaire donors, we put the needs of mega corporations, of the super wealthy, before the vast majority of ordinary people in this constituency, who Keir Starmer is supposed to be representing. And for a representative democracy to work, the people elected have to be of the community. We have to see them in our community, and they have to represent our community. Now, if Keir Starmer is failing to do that in his own constituency of Holborn and St Pancras, what do we imagine he's going to do across Britain as a whole? Because what he's offering us is exactly the same as the Tories offer. Permanent austerity, forever wars, and the socio-economic suffering like we witnessed here the other day, and climate degradation that comes with it. It's not just me, the strange little pale individual from the southern tip of Africa, someone who has experience as an MP, who has drafted the financial legislative framework for the post-apartheid South Africa, who stood up to political corruption in his own party, rather than forsake the oath that I'd taken to the constitution of my country. Someone who has investigated political corruption for almost 23 years. Somebody who knows, because I was taught by Nelson Mandela, what an honor and privilege it is to represent a community and to be in that community every day, so you understand the issues and concerns of that community. I was taught something by Nelson Mandela, and that is that if you think you are more important than the people you want to represent, then you're of no value to those people. You're of no value to your community. You're of no value to your country. And I have had the honor of serving my community in South Africa as a member of parliament for 7.5 years. And under a man like Mandela, who was a man of integrity, a man of compassion, a man of honesty, and a man who treated every single human being he came into contact with the same respect and dignity with which he himself wanted to be treated. Now I compare that to the man who wants to be our next Prime Minister. He makes one thing easy for us. He makes one thing easy for us. We don't have to guess when he's lying. Because unfortunately, he conforms to the caricature and stereotype of a politician, in that we know whenever he's lying because his lips are moving. This is the man who said Jeremy Corbyn was a close friend of his. Now he claims he never said that. This is a man who said that Israel has the right to deprive the people of Gaza of water and electricity, creating the worst humanitarian crisis we have seen probably since the Second World War. And he claims he never said it. He clearly doesn't understand how social media works. And look, I'm old. I turned 60 a few months ago. But even I know that when I say something and I put it on Twitter or it's on Sky, you can actually see it. It doesn't disappear because you decided 2 days later that you never said it. This is a man who claims to be a human rights lawyer. Let's think about that for a moment. A human rights lawyer. He spent his professional life, supposedly, fighting cases to safeguard the human rights of people. But this is a man who will not call for an unqualified ceasefire in Gaza. Tens of billions of our pounds, yours and mine, the money we pay in our taxes, are being used to subsidize BAE Systems, one of the most corrupt companies in the world, Kinetic, Rolls-Royce, Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli arms company with 7 factories in Britain. And those subsidies go into the production of the weapons. The weapons that are then used by the Israeli military to slaughter 40,000 innocent people, most of them women and children. Not a flicker from this man, not a moment of concern. That money, the tens of billions of our money, is what should be invested in our community. What should be invested in the terrible state of housing in Holborn and St Pancras. Why does Camden Council not employ people to come and fix our houses? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. And if I was saying this as a book, I'd have a footnote with all of my evidence. Because I won't say anything in public that I don't have documentary evidence for. The reason they don't is because if they employ those people themselves, then their political party doesn't get the donations from the company that is making all of the profits when they outsource making our repairs. That's why. And that is why under the Tories and under a Keir Starmer government, we would have the best democracy money can buy. Because our system of government in this country has been bought and paid for. And it's with our money. It's our money. Who do these people think they are? That they're using our money to enrich themselves, their political parties, and themselves personally. Just like Tony Blair has made over £100 million personally from the decision to invade Iraq, in which around 1 million people have died, and his association with companies like BAE Systems, which were used to corrupt our democracy in South Africa, just 4 years after we won our democracy. And that is why we need an MP in this constituency who understands what political corruption is and will investigate it
and will expose those involved in it, so that we can have investment in our housing. So that rather than giving £1.5 million to Google, that poor, tiny, struggling company that needs our money to build its fancy new office next to the Camden Council office in Pancras Square, instead of wanting to push poorer people out of our borough so that we can have more Googles, more shops and retail places, and more luxury developments. The Kentish Town West Estate, the council wants to demolish it. Over 360 dwellings. They want to build luxury apartments in its place. But oh, they're very concerned about us, the community, because they will give 40 dwellings that are affordable. But what is affordable to Keir Starmer and people like him and the people who run his council in Camden is not affordable to ordinary people. We pay one of the highest percentages in the entire UK of our income on rent, just to be able to have a roof over our head. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. I'm so proud to be South African, Bangladeshi, British, and a citizen of the world. Because that is what most of us are. I come from a country that struggled against 360 odd years of racism. I know what racism is when I see it and I hear it. When our MP thinks he has to do an interview with the Sun newspaper, that disgustingly racist rag that in a functioning democracy would not be allowed to exist. And he talks about the fact that people trying to seek a place to live in Britain, when he talks about wanting to turn those people away and return them to their own countries, which community comes to mind? Bangladeshis. This is the Nigel Farage of North London. Yes. Because if we look at this man's behavior, look at how he treats Muslim women in his own party. Look at how he treats black women in his own party. Nelson Mandela said to us, you are either opposed to every single form of racism, or you are part of the racism problem. And I'll tell you something. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party today in Britain are a big part of the racism problem. And that... So please, the next 4 days are as much about you as they are about me. We have an historic opportunity to get rid of a man who might well be more right-wing than the Tory party. And let me explain to you. South African apartheid was based on a system of European settler colonialism. People from Holland and Britain turned up. And they decided that this was a land with no people. So they took it over. And I never understood in my history lessons in an apartheid school in South Africa how these white people were always fighting wars. Because if there were no people on this land, who were they fighting the wars against? Themselves? Of course there were people there. There were millions of people there. And the myth of the creation of the State of Israel is that this was a land with no people for a people with no land. Yeah. And that was a lie. Yes. Palestine, as you know better than all of us, was built on the graves of the Palestinian people, on the houses of the Palestinian people. And why what we are seeing over the last 9 months in Gaza, and let's be clear, our governments haven't only enabled and facilitated this, they have profited from it. Because those arms companies that are making the billions out of the suffering of the Palestinian people are exactly the people who donate to their political parties. People say that it is anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. People say that it is anti-Semitic talk about an Israel lobby. Let me tell you something as a Jew, and as a proud Jew, as the son of a Holocaust survivor who spent 3.5 years hidden in a coal cellar, while dozens of her family were gassed to death in Auschwitz. Let me tell you as a Jew who introduced the first ever motion on the Holocaust in the entire history of the South African Parliament. As a Jew, it is my responsibility to criticize the state of Israel. It is my responsibility. It is my responsibility to call out the Israel lobby for what it is. And what is it? And it's not the only lobby in the world. There is a Saudi lobby. There is a Russian lobby. There's a Chinese lobby. There's an American lobby. There's a British lobby. This is how our politics are conducted today. Our countries put billions and billions of pounds into trying to influence the policies of other governments. And no one does it more than the Israelis and the Saudis. Why? Because they are the two biggest human rights abusers on the planet. And I would call an inquiry into the complicity of our government, our parliamentarians, and our defense companies, and our officials serving in government in the genocide of the Palestinian people. So that all of Britain, all of the world could see exposed in the Houses of Parliament the blood on our hands, the blood all over what is supposed to be the mother of all parliaments. I would then introduce legislation to call for an immediate and permanent halt to all arms sales to the State of Israel and to Saudi Arabia, which is committing atrocities in Yemen against other Muslim brothers and sisters. And further, I would invite my comrades from South Africa who have led the ICJ process. I would ask them to come and give evidence in the British Parliament about why they did that, and about the evidence that they gave to the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. And for every South African that was there, I would have a Palestinian, like my friend Ahmed Al-Nawab, who has lost 21 members of his family. He has one relative left in the world. And this is a man who, when I said to him, he's 24 years old, when I said to him, Ahmed, you need to find time to grieve, he said to me, there is no time to grieve. There is too much work to be done to try and ensure that no other Palestinian family has to endure what I have endured. And he will only grieve when that is the case. And I share with Ahmed in the spirit of all of those who have died, in the spirit of all of those who are fighting every day of their lives to survive, that I will work tirelessly in the Parliament to try and stop Britain's complicity in what is, and I didn't need a court to tell me this, in what is a genocide happening before our eyes in real time using our weapons. 41 members of the Labour Party are members of Labour Friends of Israel and have received money from the Israeli state, directly or indirectly. The figure for the Tory party is even higher. So the way in which Israel gets us to say only what Israel wants us to say, so that Joe Biden says there is no genocide, so that Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer say there is no genocide, Israel can do whatever it wants. The reason they do that is because they know our politicians know they can get money from the State of Israel, directly or indirectly. And two, that if they don't, they get called anti-Semites. And for people who don't have my sort of background, who when someone calls me an anti-Semite, I can laugh in their face. And I can tell them that what they are doing is they are destroying the essential struggle against actual anti-Semitism, against actual Islamophobia, and against all racism. Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary is a man called David Lammy, who is standing to be re-elected in Tottenham. If any of you have friends or family in Tottenham, please tell them to vote for Nandita Lal, who is standing against him. David Lammy, at a meeting of America's right-wing Republican Party, of which Donald Trump is the candidate for president. That's right, the racist Donald Trump.
Misogynistic as well.
And misogynistic. He speaks to a meeting of this party, and he says, Nelson Mandela would not approve of the student encampments that students across America and Britain and Europe have erected in support of the people of Gaza. Now, I'm assuming David Lammy did no history at any point in his life. Because if he's talking about the same Nelson Mandela that I worked for, that man, when he was released from prison, traveled to America, to the UK and across Europe to specifically thank the students who had done exactly what the students are doing today, when they built encampments for years and years in order to destroy apartheid in South Africa. And I told Nandita, and I told David Lammy, which of course he hasn't responded to, because these people don't. It's as though the rest of us don't exist.
Yes, exactly.
That if Nelson Mandela was alive today, he would be in the encampments with the students. He would not go anywhere near David Lammy, Keir Starmer, and their like, because he would see them for what they are. Where the health service is funded by public money, they put in place people who come from the private sector to turn our national health services, including our hospitals and GP surgeries, into businesses. So, what we have to do is we have to roll back the privatization that has already taken place in all of the NHS services. Yeah. One. And two, we need to ban any future privatization of the greatest jewel in the crown of this country, yeah, which is the NHS. I don't want to be a politician. So if I'm talking to someone and I think they want to hear a particular answer, unfortunately, they're going to get what I believe, not what they want to hear necessarily. That's how I've lived my life for 60 years. It ain't about to change now. But more importantly than that, the political tradition that I come from simply doesn't allow that. Because if you want to represent your community, you aren't a politician, you're a member of your community. There should be no such thing as professional politicians in any functioning democracy. Our representatives should be people from the community. So, finally, let me say one more thing. We're going to do whatever we can to beat Keir Starmer, but we need your help to do it. And if we don't get disheartened, because this is just the beginning. And all of us are going nowhere. They can try and push us, like they're trying to push one housing estate that they're trying to demolish. They've offered them alternative accommodation. It just so happens to be in Liverpool. That's how little they think of us. We are not going anywhere.
No.
But what we are going to do after the election, whether I'm your MP or not, and if I am your MP, Your duty is to give me a rough time, to ensure that I am accountable to you, because democracy doesn't function otherwise. And if I'm not your MP, I'm going to be with you to hold our MP and all MPs to account, because we're going to build a movement in Camden and across Britain that is going to hold our MPs to account, and that over the next few years is going to fundamentally alter the structure and functioning of our politics. And I cannot tell you what that movement is going to look like. I cannot tell you who is going to lead it, because democracy suggests that we together as a mass movement will democratically decide those sorts of things. And just like we did in South Africa, just like we're going to do in Palestine, so we're going to do in Camden and in Britain. Thank you for being here. It is up to you to make sure that everybody understands that they need to get out and vote. My name will be number 3 on the voting paper, on the ballot paper.